and welcome to 10. Oh, do we have to use the microphone? No, we don't? Okay, great. Oh, that's good.
How are we doing in the back? Can you hear? You good? Audio check? Nice. All right,
Great.
awesome.
Perfect. This thing on? Yes.
Right.
Send website and document accessibility errors you can fix now. First of all, before we get into this, I'd like to ask you guys just a question, just a show of hands. How many here would have no problem hand editing HTML?
Hand editing what?
HTML. All right. Okay. Thank you. Just trying to figure out, how much explanation. I don't want to, miscommunicate. So thanks so much. All righty. Good. All right. This is our table of contents. This is what we are going to go through today. We'll give you a brief introduction to the accessibility standards and the laws, and then we'll go into the 10 things you can actually fix. And then there'll be a Q&A session at the end. I'm Jacob Riff, and I work with Monsito. We're a web governance tool that scans websites for errors and optimization opportunities, among other things, accessibility errors. So that's kind of where my interest in accessibility comes from. The product didn't have an accessibility checker initially, but we saw that that was the next big thing many years ago, and we built that in as well, and it's one of our most important products now. I'm originally from Denmark. I moved here to the US about 2.5 years ago to start up the US operations of Monsito. So yeah, the accent, now you know why. And as it says here, in my free time I love skiing when I have time for it.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Rayius with Common Look. So Monsito and Common Look have partnered together. So Monsito deals with HTML, accessibility, websites, and so on, and our focus is PDF accessibility. And also just want to do another quick audio check to make sure that y'all can still hear us, because now there's a dance party next door. And are we still good? All right, awesome, cool. Yeah, right. Well, lucky for me, so a little bit of my background and so on. I've been with Common Look for about 6 years now. It says stuff up there that I do and all that stuff. But one of the things that I don't know, sometimes people find interesting about me and my background is that actually my gig before this, speaking of dance party, is I was a middle school band teacher for 11 years, right? So that's where I come from. So some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today might be technical, like how many of you can edit HTML and all that stuff, and how many of you can tag a PDF, right? I would maybe expect slightly fewer hands up on that. The important thing is, for example, I don't have an IT background. I'm not a developer. I haven't been in this forever and all that stuff. I just ask a ton of questions, right? And I had to learn this stuff too, coming in as a band guy. Right? I didn't know this stuff. I put embarrassingly enough, as a band teacher, I put a whole bunch of inaccessible PDFs on our inaccessible school website, right? Oops. But yeah, I had to learn this stuff too, right? And it's just ask the questions. So we're here, throw some stuff at you, ask the questions, right? I guarantee you, in a room with this many people in it, if you're thinking the question, somebody else is too, and if you're actually brave enough to ask it, somebody's going to be really relieved that you did, right? So jump in, let's make it interactive and conversational, and go ahead and yell, because speaking of accessibility and disabilities and stuff like that, one of my things is being a middle school band director, I've got noise-induced hearing loss, right? So if I'm like, it's not that I'm trying to give you a dirty look, it's that I'm actually trying to hear. So over the dance party next door, feel free to yell, it's cool, right? But anyway, we're glad you're here, so we'll get started with what we're doing, right? Now, Jacob and I mentioned a couple times accessibility. One thing that I think is important is to meet there. What's accessibility? Right? And sometimes we make the assumption that people know what we're talking about, But for example, we go to a lot of conferences and stuff, and I was at a healthcare convention one time. I'm working at the booth, I'm hanging out at the booth, and a hospital director comes walking by, and I'm talking to him. He's like, what do you do? I'm like, do you use PDFs at the hospital? And he's like, yeah, that's kind of like the no-brainer question, right? Like, of course you do, right? So my follow-up question is, are they accessible? And he literally said to me, I don't know, I can find them whenever I need to, right? So if that's your perspective and if that's your perception of what accessibility is, then we need to define that, right? We're not only talking about findable, right? You know, that's access in one sense of the word, but making sure that everybody can read the content on your webpage, use the content on your webpage. Everybody can use the PDFs that you have there, read them, get the information from them, right? Regardless of ability or disability or whatever, right? And that's what we're talking about when we say accessibility, right? So realizing that, if you're like, oh shoot, I don't care about this, then you know, now's your chance. But no, I'm glad you're here, and hopefully you do care, because it's a really important thing, right? Assuming that you're creating websites, don't you want your stuff to be able to be read and used and so on, right? So that's why we're here. That's what the important thing is about web and web content, electronic content accessibility.
Yeah, and then why should we care about it? The web was created many, many years ago, not that many years ago, but you know, in relative terms, a long time ago. And when Tim Berners-Lee created the structured markup language that is HTML, I don't believe that he was thinking about accessibility that much, but incidentally what he created ended up being very accessible. So that was good, right? The thing is, the web and HTML is very accessible, you know, the way it's built, but then we make it not accessible when we create web pages. Because the markup language in itself, the foundation of the web, is basically just text that anybody and any system can read. But then we, without knowing it, without wanting to, built in traps and built in obstacles that make it non-accessible. And that's why it's important to know about accessibility, because when we know about it, we can kind of catch ourselves doing that and then do something about it. And we refer to websites with accessibility, with web accessibility, but documents are just as important, because when we put a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation or a PDF or something on the web, then that information that is enclosed in that document is now part of the web and part of the offering of information that you guys are managing and are responsible for. Try and picture this. Let's say you have a web page. White background, white text. All right? Who is that website or web page accessible to? Who can read that? Excuse me?
Screen reader.
Yes. It's actually only accessible to people using screen readers. Isn't that great? I mean, you know, it's inaccessible to people who are not using assistive technologies. Okay? Then let's do something else. Let's say that the page is very nicely laid out, and the color contrast is good, and everything is fine, and there's a link on the page to information that most visitors would want to read. And they click on the link, and the link is broken. Now that information is inaccessible to everybody. Nobody can access that information. It doesn't matter if they have any disabilities or not. It's just inaccessible. So web accessibility is kind of, you know, it's kind of everything, and it's kind of all-encompassing. And then we have everything in between, where color contrasts are not good enough, where the structure of the page is not good enough, where the images are not properly described. And all of that is something we're going to go into here, because we're going to cover what you can easily fix. There is enough about web accessibility that's difficult. Let's look at the things that make a huge difference and are also easy to fix.
So not only from a usability standpoint, right, but you know, Jacob asked the easy question here, so you know, happily will answer. How many of you would be able to edit HTML, right? Sometimes the harder question, the one that you don't really want to answer, there's the legal component of this too, right? You want people to be able to use your website, and it's all the feel-good stuff should be accessible and all that, right? But there's also legal requirements and consequences and so on, right? How many of you work in
that one, Paul.
Right? How many of you work in a situation, an agency where you've been sued or you've gotten your nastygram from OCR, or somebody actually brave enough to raise their hand? Yeah, a couple of hands going up, right? Other people are like, right? I don't want to admit it, but there's legal things out there too, right? With the requirements. Not only do you have to do this to make your content accessible so that people can get to your information and all that, but yeah, like laws actually require it too, right? So, and we'll get into some of that as well. But oftentimes we're asked, how compliant do we have to be, right? How compliant does my website, how compliant do my documents have to be? Do I really have to go all the way to 100%, or can I get close enough? Think about it this way. If somebody's in a wheelchair and they're trying to get into a building and they make it 60, 70, even 90% of the way up the ramp, they're not in the building, right? That building's not accessible. If somebody can go to your web page and get to 60, 70, 90% of your content, there's 10% they can't get to, right? So it's not accessible. Some people are missing out on some stuff. It could be some crucial stuff. It could be some like life-threatening stuff, right? What if what if you've got product documentation? For example, think about like the tables for for dosages for medication and so on, right? If you can read you get the drug name and blah, blah, blah and all that stuff, but the dosing based on age and weight and whatever is different, right? And that's the 10% of the documentation that you can't read, and you don't know how much to take or how much is too much or whatever, that's a serious miss, right? So it's huge. So how compliant does your content have to be? 100%, right? Not only because people are missing out on stuff, but again, that whole legal thing comes up, right? But this question comes up a lot because it's a lot of work, right? So how much work do I have to put in? All of it, right? And the other thing too is if you're not making your website, your documentation and so on 100% compliant, and maybe say, well, 90% is close enough, right? It's good enough. People can get most of the information. In a way, you're kind of saying to people who need that other 10% that can't get to it, you're kind of saying you're not really worth the effort. How cool is that? Right? So make it 100%.
Right. And with that, oh, this one is actually you, Paul.
Sorry. Yes. Okay. So there's standards, right? So how do we make it compliant? All right. So there's standards. Many of you maybe have heard of WCAG. Heard it called a bunch of things. WCAG, YCAG, WCAG, WCAG. I call it WCAG. Right. That's where I come. You call it WCAG, don't you?
No, I do WCAG.
Okay. Right.
Rolls right off your tongue.
So, yes. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, right? There's WCAG 2.0, there's WCAG 2.1, right? So they've updated the standard, added some stuff to it, make things a little bit more user-friendly. A lot of focus on mobile with WCAG 2.1. But the whole point is that WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, originally developed for HTML for websites and so on. It applies really well to PDF. So if you have PDF documents, then you can make them WCAG compliant, and generally speaking, you're going to be good to go. Who are my federal government friends in the room? Federal government friends? A couple of you? Okay. So Section 508, right, refreshed to now be WCAG 2.0 AA, and so that works great for applications, websites, and documents and so on, right? Whereas there's another standard, PDF UA, is a PDF specific standard, right? So that's just kind of how they're different. WCAG applies well to all. PDF UA does not apply to your websites, right? Which can get a little bit confusing because if you've got a website, you want to make it WCAG compliant, but if you've got PDFs on it and you want to make them PDF UA compliant, then you have to be aware of two standards, right, for one thing. Now, what's nice about WCAG and PDF UA is that WCAG isn't going to make you do something to your PDFs that will then make you fail PDF UA, right? They don't conflict with each other. So now PDF UA, when it comes to PDFs, is more stringent. There are more checkpoints and more requirements. But if you pass PDF UA, you're also going to pass WCAG 2.0, or also actually WCAG 2.1. So you're good to go with that regard as well, right? To make things easy on you, if you only want to remember one standard, remember the WCAG ones, whether it's 2.0 for my federal government friends or WCAG 2.1. Federal government friends, I'd recommend you go with WCAG 2.1 anyway, but letter of the law 508 is WCAG 2.0. So, that's that. When it comes to implementing, as Jacob said, HTML is accessible, and then y'all go and do things that break it, right? PDF is a little bit trickier, but it all comes down to the tagging in a PDF. We're going to talk about this. Tags, by the way, how many of you have heard of tagged PDF? Right, not a new term. Awesome, great. Tags, by the way, just so we're all clear on this, that's the bare minimum when it comes to accessibility, right? A PDF has to be tagged, but chances are great that you're going to have to do stuff to those tags to make sure that, or at least check them to make sure that everything is going to be handled right by assistive technology. You can't just look at a PDF and say, oh, it's tagged, we're good, right? It doesn't quite work that way. But we're going to go through some things today that you can address to make sure that you're in good shape, right? But the tags are the important thing in a PDF, fortunately, for you that have familiarity with HTML. If you're familiar with HTML, then PDF tagging is very similar to simple HTML, right? So sometimes I have to tell people to dumb it down if they know everything there is to know about HTML, but you've got that foundation anyway. Always, whether you're designing documents or designing your website, being proactive and thinking about accessibility from the beginning is going to be much better, much faster, much easier, more efficient, cost-effective than just creating your website and then realizing you got a whole bunch of problems that you have to then go fix, right? So being aware of things from the start, and you're in much better shape.
Right, and let's get into the stuff you can actually fix on your website. If not easily, then without too much of a hassle. We'll start out with color use and color contrast and do all the attributes. Hopefully everybody has heard of all the attributes. Page structure and link text, really important. Forms, keyboard accessibility, reading order, and tables. And once we're through that, then we will open it up for questions. So, but please, if there's anything about this where you're thinking about a question, please ask it. We don't mind being interrupted, so please just shoot. Okay? Great.
So one of the first things is color use, right? It's an easy one. The general rule is don't use color as the only way of conveying information, right? That's kind of the no-brainer part of the color checkpoint, right? But I like to refer to the color checkpoint as an umbrella. There's other things that people don't necessarily know or think about when it comes to color use, right? Really, the guideline is don't use color or contrast, format, layout, location on the page, font change, style change, whatever, as the only way of conveying information, right? So if in your document or on your webpage you got, all definitions are in the right sidebar, somebody who's using a screen reader to read a PDF, for example, doesn't know when they're in the right sidebar, right? So it's a definition based on where it is located on the page. Somebody who's not looking at the page isn't getting that, right? So just be aware of that. Not only not to use color as the only way of conveying information, and it's not don't use color, right? It's don't use that as the only way to convey information. Those other things too. Again, font changes, right? Style, location, etc. Right?
Yeah. For example, click the blue button. Click the round button or something. But see, that doesn't work either. What if you can't see the button, right? So you kind of keep going down that path. So then what are you doing, right? You can't use shape, you can't use color, you can't use. So again, put some text on the button, right? That works, right? Click the button that says buy. That works. And then remember, bold text. Bold text is not read by screen readers. The bold tag is just ignored in most cases. So nobody would know the emphasis you're trying to put behind the whatever you're bolding, right? So instead use a strong tag, for example, if you need to, because bold doesn't work, right? Then we have color contrast. Color contrast is really important because now that we know that we shouldn't really use color alone, we should also look at when we use color. Because it's not bad to use color, it's just that it shouldn't be the only thing you do. But when you use color to do something that looks nice, then maybe it doesn't look nice for everybody. Maybe it looks nice to you because you either have some sort of a difference of perceiving color, or maybe you don't. But not everybody is like you. So to some people, it might be really easy to read those two examples, but to many people it won't be. So in that case, we need to make sure that when we do use color, we use the right contrast, meaning that the background and the foreground are enough, have enough of a difference between them to be readable by everybody. Now, it's always easy to just look at it and perceive it yourselves, but really it's much better to use a color contrast checker of some sort. WebAIM has one, Mozilla has one on their website. There are many color contrast checkers, and the WCAG standards state that 4.5 to 1 is a good contrast ratio to use for level AA in the WCAG 2.0 for normal sized text and visual representations. That's kind of a big, contrast. It will make it easy to read it. It's being relaxed a bit for text or illustrations that are larger in size. So when you're up to 19 pixels or larger, is what the guidelines say, then you can relax that a bit and only use 3 to 1. And if you don't know what 4.5 to 1 and 3 to 1 means, then take any color contrast checker that you can get your hands on and just try and play around with the colors, because it will be very easy to see when it's good and when it's not good, and then try and look at whatever contrast ratio is being shown in the color contrast checker, because then you can see what it is that you're working with and what you have to work with. And again, we're not talking about making the website completely different from what it is. In most cases, when you want to fix stuff like this, you just want to make small, subtle changes to the background and to the foreground, so you get within that window of 4.5 to 1 or 3 to 1 for larger text and visuals. When we talk to customers who inquire about the color contrast, in most cases, when we've suggested another color scheme, in most cases they can't really tell the difference. The design is still the same, it looks the same. It's just, it's just easier to read for everybody. So you don't have to change your entire website. Just the subtle changes in most cases are enough.
So for WCAG 2.0, right, it's the 4.5 to 1 for regular size text and so on, or 3 to 1 for large. In WCAG 2.1, one of the additions to WCAG 2.1 was kind of beefing up the contrast requirements, contrast checkpoints. So now in WCAG 2.1, there's a requirement for graphics as well. Right? So in WCAG 2.0, along with the large text, logos are actually exempt from contrast check. All right. However, in WCAG 2.1, the logo itself is still exempt, but the contrast between that logo and its adjacent colors, right, needs to be at least 3 to 1. All right. So that's new to WCAG 2.1. Right.
So that was color. Any questions for that before we move on to the next topic? All right. Next up is alt attributes. We just spoke about images, logos, color, all that. Alt attributes on images is another really important thing, because as we all know, if you have a vision impairment or if you're using a screen reader for any other reason, then you probably can't see the picture. You can't see the image. You don't know what it is. You don't know what's in it. It's just a block of big old nothing that you can't really perceive, right? And that's exactly what we don't want to happen. So when we have images on a website and we want the website to be accessible, or PDF for that matter, we need to provide some alternative way for people who need the alternative way to actually perceive what's in the image. And the big question is, can we make it the exact same experience for somebody who is not seeing the image as somebody who is seeing the image? No, probably not. I mean, that probably can't be done yet. Hopefully someday it can. So it doesn't mean that we have to describe every single pixel in the image. That's not what alt text is about. It's about providing the information that the image is supposed to give so that a person who cannot see the image for some reason still gets the full context of what the entire page is about. Now, we sometimes talk about alt text and alt attributes and use those words interchangeably, but it's not the same. The alt attribute is something you put in the HTML tag, and now I know that we're getting a bit deep in that, but that's the technical term for how we actually supply the browser or screen reader, whatever is being used, with the alt text, which is the value. So we have the alt attribute, and then we have the attribute being filled with something, and that is the alt text. The alt text is what describes the image. Alt doesn't describe the image, because any image on a web page should have an alt attribute, but it shouldn't necessarily have an alt text. We'll show the code in just a minute. Well, we can do it here. Yep. So right down here, we can see in the HTML that this is the image tag. Then we have the source. This is the image we're loading. Then we have alt equals. This is the alt attribute. And what's inside here is the alt text. And this alt equals, and then those two should always be on an image, but the text shouldn't necessarily. If the image is decorative, that means that the image is not really important to the content of the web page. If it doesn't matter to the content, but it's just something that looks nice, and you can just as well perceive the content on the page without seeing the image as if you can see the image, then it is decorative. And then the alt attribute should be empty, meaning there just shouldn't be anything in here.
Between the quotes.
Yes, exactly. Between the quotes, that was the word I didn't quite remember in English.
Thank you for playing.
Yes, thank you. So within the quotes, there just should be nothing, because that means the screen reader will read that and say, oh, this image is not important, so I'll just disregard it completely. Now, if there is no alt attribute, then most screen readers are going to read the file name. And in many cases, that will be that, but then, maybe it'll have 640 times 800 dot final third revision something. It'll all be read. And that just doesn't help anybody. It wastes time and it doesn't add anything, right? So you can help immensely by actually putting alt text in there that is meaningful, or just not putting any alt text in there at all. And when we talk about meaningful alt text, remember when you're at school and you got this assignment that, oh, here's a picture, can you please analyze that? And then write, 3-4 pages about it? That's not what the alt text should be, right? That would be all fun and games, but nobody really wants to read or hear all that if it's just an image of a tree, right? Yes, it can be beautifully composed and all that, but it's not important. If it's a picture of a tree, maybe it's a specific tree. Maybe it's a very specific tree because that tree is being described in the content around the image. Then it's very important what tree it is. But if it's just a tree and it doesn't really matter, then you can safely just put tree. If it's just a tree, that's fine. But it's all about trying to figure out what would I want to know about this image if I couldn't see the image and I was reading the content around the image. Asking yourself that question usually gives you a very good idea about what should be in the alt text. And then remember, picture of, image of, not necessary, because the screen reader will put that context in there when it reads the alt text of the image. You don't need to do that as well. It'll read image of, and then whatever you put in there. So it doesn't really add anything. So just put the description in there. Yes?
Did you say if you read the alt text blank quotes, the reader will not read the file name?
Yes. Okay. Exactly. Because that's your way of telling the reader this image is not important.
So if the alt tag was not there at all,
then it will read it. Then it would probably read the source code, but it isn't the source. But again, it depends on the screen reader. But in most cases, it would read the file name because maybe, just maybe, there would be something in the file name that would help the visitor, right? But again, it shouldn't be that way. We should have done this. We should have provided that context for the image. Right?
Does it handle the title attribute?
What was that, sorry?
The title attribute, how would it handle that?
Most screen readers don't. Most screen readers don't use it. It's the alt attribute because that's what the alt attribute was designed for. It's also, actually, back in the day, Tim Berners-Lee again, it was designed for when the image source couldn't be loaded. Then the alt text would be displayed instead, right? Now it's more of an accessibility feature because in most cases the image would load. The web isn't that broken anymore. But so now it's being used for alt text for people with disabilities or anybody using a text browser. For some reason they were doing that. Right?
So when it comes to PDF and HTML are similar, granted, but they also have their differences. And this is actually one of the things where there's a difference between alternative text for images in PDF versus in HTML, right? So if you have an image that conveys important information in a PDF, that figure tag needs to have alternative text, right? However, if you have a decorative image in your PDF that you don't need to waste somebody's time with, who's using a screen reader, for example, then the solution is not to put empty quotes in the alternative text for the properties for that figure tag, right? Instead, in PDF, what you need to do is you need to place that image in an artifact container, which is actually over on the untagged side of things in a PDF, so that if you think about it, if a screen reader and refreshable braille display, other assistive technologies are reading from the tags in a PDF, if something's not tagged, then it's not read, right? So the solution then for decorative images to have them not be read is to put them in an artifact container so that they're not tagged, all right? So that's the solution for that. So don't add empty quotes to your alternative text in a PDF, because then a screen reader is going to say graphic, but then you don't know what it's a graphic of, right? So instead it's the artifact container method.
Next up is page structure. Any questions about alt text apart from that? PDFs or anything? Nope. So page structure is another really important thing when it comes to web accessibility. That goes for documents, that goes for web pages. Because the structure of the page is crucial for so many different things. We'll get into tab order and keyboard accessibility as well in just a moment, and for that it's really important as well. But if the page is well structured, meaning that it's apparent what the page is about when you just look at the top of the page, and you can easily perceive where the main content is, what's most important on the page, how the content is structured, then that's a nice experience for everybody. It's a nice experience for us, and it's a very nice experience for the screen reader as well. And we don't have to be nice to the screen reader, but we have to be nice to the user of the screen reader. And when everybody are able to perceive the page structure easily, then that just makes it easier to just take the content in, process it, and do something with it. And when the right reading order on the page has been defined, then that also makes it easier for the browser to restructure the page when you make the viewport smaller. So that's great for mobile, and that's great for SEO. So you can kind of just win all the way around. Now, when anybody here using the reader function on your phone, like on an iPhone or Android, where it kind of just removes everything and just shows the context? The content, yes, all right, one person does. That's actually something you should look on your phone, because when you look at a web page on your phone, usually there is this button you can click, and then it just removes all the ads and all the side menus and all the menus, just shows the content. When that's possible for the phone, that means that the page is structured in a way where it's easy to find the main content of the page. And that's what we want to go with, because that's great for everybody. When you want to fix your page structure, obviously having easy menus that are easy to use, well-structured menus where you can find any piece of information you want without having to sift through 20 menus and sub-menus and, you know, just move the mouse just a bit outside that menu and it all collapses and then you have to start over. If that's all well and good. The main thing is the headings, because this is what helps screen readers and any other assistive technology with kind of giving a map of the page and making sure that it's possible to navigate the page without too much hassle. When you have put the H1 first, the H2 is the next one, the H3 is the next one, and then keep going like that, then it's very easy for anybody to go through the content, move to the section of the content that they want to read, and then go from there. So if your web pages have heading tags where an H1 is followed by an H3, and then you have an H1 again, and then you have an H5, then that is something that should be fixed. And that's what we want to try and show you here, that fixing your page structure should start with fixing the heading tags and making sure that there is a title tag on the page, because those two things will give you a really big bang for the buck, and it's great for SEO as well. So you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Now again, some of the differences between HTML and PDF when it comes to headings, some similarities. First of all, if you think about your headings like an outline, right, so your H1 for your title, and then the major sections of your document are going to be your H2s, right? So chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, those are all going to be your H2s. And then within chapter 1, you have section A, B, and C. So section A is going to be your heading 3, section B is your heading 3, and then when you get to chapter 2, you're back out to heading level 2. Right? So if you think about headings like an outline, then sometimes that helps people, right? Again, for structure, navigation, and so on. Now, one thing that might be important to mention is the difference in PDF between the title tag. There actually is a title tag in PDF, but it doesn't get treated like one would expect, right? Title tags actually map to heading level 4. So if you use that for the title of your document, then you're starting with a heading level 4, and then you go to a heading level 1, and things get all weird, right? So just like with HTML, you've got your H1, and then you go down from there, right? So now, that being said, there's sometimes debate, and so sometimes it's fun about, you know, how many H1s can you have in a PDF, and so on and so forth. And to make things even more fun, the PDF standard is changing, but we won't go there right now. For now, go with H1 for your title, and then H2s for your major sections, and go from there, right? So just kind of things to keep in mind. Yeah?
So does it matter per page? Like if you have an H1, 2, and 3 on page 1, you go to page 2, and you have page 2 can start up with, it can just flow from one page to another, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Another great difference between HTML and a PDF, right? A PDF is one long book or whatever, right? Whereas a website, you've got pages that are kind of their own standalone things, right? So yeah, in a PDF, when you go to page 2, you don't start with H1 again, right? Yeah, again, the H1 is used once in a PDF for the title of the document, and then just where you are from there, right? Yep, good question though, thank you. So good with heading levels, kind of maybe a little bit on how they're different in PDF, bless you.
I just had a question when you were talking about the title tag in a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying not to use a title tag in a PDF?
For now.
Just to use the H1
Mm-hmm.
for
your title. Yep.
For title.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, for now. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Say you have a Word document and you're saving it as a PDF, how does that handle the tags?
Not well, which is actually, so, a little shameless plug, Common Look with the tools and solutions, we have a plugin for Word and PowerPoint where it helps with that, because that's the thing, if you start with a title tag in a Word document and then you print to PDF or what, depending on your export option, you could put all that work into a Word document and you generate the PDF with no tags at all. Then you get to start over, right? Which is not fun. But yeah, the other thing is that the title style from Word comes in as a heading level 4. So then you have to shift everything around. It gets a little weird. So, along with heading levels to help with structure and navigation and so on, we also mentioned reading order. Now, reading order in HTML might be a little bit different from reading order in PDF, and there's kind of the great debate. You can Google how to fix the reading order in a PDF, and you're going to find all kinds of nifty answers and fun videos, and half of them are wrong. So there's the big misconception when it comes to reading order in PDF. As we've said before, when assistive technology is reading a PDF to somebody, it's reading from the tags, right? So the order of the tags in the tag tree, that's the order, unless you're using navigation, right? If you're just having your screen reader read the document straight through, it just goes straight down the tags, and the order of the tags is the order that the content will be read to the user. Now, in PDF, you can Google and look up online, and you're going to find a lot of misconceptions that this, and a lot of people will refer to this as the Z order panel. This is why I wore the white shirt today, just in case, so you can see it twice. But the Z order panel, some people will refer to that because it's got the little Z icon in it, right? And Acrobat doesn't really make that easy because it mentions, reordering tagged PDF and all that stuff. And you'll find information out there about changing the reading order by moving stuff around in that panel, and that is not the correct answer. When it comes to PDF remediation and making sure that your PDFs really are accessible, we fix the reading order in the tags. It's probable, it's likely at least, that the order of the tags and the order of stuff over in that order panel, when your remediation work is done, won't match, and that's okay. Right? According to the standards, screen readers and assistive technology are supposed to read from the tags, so that's really all you need to worry about. Right? But a lot of times people think they need to make both match, and then they think they're doing double work for themselves. Right? If you're paid by the hour, go for it. Right? But if you've got better things to do with the rest of your day, just worry about the tags and pat yourself on the back for a job well done, and then you're good to go. Okay? So are we good with reading order? How many of you have tried to remediate PDFs and you found that information of you need to fix stuff in that Z order panel? Anybody?
I did.
Yeah? Right?
I need
See?
ours.
All right. Cool.
We use
All right.
look now. Sure. Hyperlink text. So hyperlink text is so easy to do and so difficult to get right. And that's why we want to kind of touch on that as well. We're talking about the link text. So we have that link tag, and then we have the text, and then we have the end of the link tag. We're not talking about a title or any other attribute you can put on a link tag. We're just talking about the link text in itself. And that's what screen readers read. They read the link text, and then the user of the screen reader will try to determine if this is a link they would want to visit, if this is the link that provides them with the information that they need. Now, if you're using a screen reader or any other assistive technology, then links are important because they are kind of the gateway to other information on the page or on another page. Remember, links can be on the same page. You can click on a link and it will just, take you to another section of the page, or it can take you to an external website that is not even your own website, or it can take you to another page on the website. And again, you never know until you click the link. You never know what you're going to get, like the chocolate store. So providing a good link text is really crucial. Imagine having to try every single link only to find out that none of them were the ones you wanted. That's not really great, right? And when you use or when you write link text, remember that people who use their voice to communicate to a browser or screen reader what they want to click on will actually have to, in many cases, read the link text. So making it easy to read and read out loud are two things that you kind of should have in mind, because it can be easy to read but not read out loud, and maybe even the voice processing system that somebody uses may not actually understand the words you're using. So keeping it simple is also great.
Should you use the words click here or click?
You played right into your game.
So that was a very good question, because that's exactly what we're going to do now. Now, if you want, you can try to close your eyes, or imagine that you're closing your eyes, and then hear your screen reader read more, click here, click here, click here, click here, more, read more. That was the links on that page. So now go to town. Which one do you want to read first? Right? So that's literally what's going to happen if you use that kind of link text. When a screen reader user scans the page, as we call it, then they will hear the links on the page, and that's what they'll hear. And again, it's so easy to get that wrong, because whatever text that link is part of will explain probably where you're going, but again, that link may not be read in the context that it's actually placed on the page. It may just be read standalone. And that's what we have to keep in mind when we're designing web pages, that's in many cases what's happened. Now, we have a good example and a bad example over here. And it's a good thing to just kind of look at that, because having this 26% of the US adult population. Now, if that was read out of context, then it does say what it is, but actually it's not quite good, right? Because it really, I don't know what I'm getting. 26% of the US adult population, what? What is it with that 26% of the US adult population? So this one is kind of borderline, because it does say something about what you're going to get, but not all of it, right? So it's good, but it's not quite good enough. Disability statistics, great. That's good. We know that we will be reading about disability statistics if we click that link. And then, you know, Bureau of Internet Accessibility website, we know exactly where we're going to go. But on the other side over here, that's going to be read. That's the link text. That's this. So the screen reader is going to start reading https://www. blah, blah, blah. That's what it's going to do. That's going to take a long time, and whatever you want is in here somewhere, but that's a file name. That's going to be horrible, and it'll be a waste of time. So make sure that whatever you do, don't make the URL the link text as well, because that doesn't help anybody. Not people using the web browser with a mouse, and not people using a screen reader or any other assistive technology. Nobody gains from that. Then we have the infamous click here. Again, it's at the end of the text. Do you want to read more than click here? Yes, it makes sense in the context, but again, that's not necessarily how a link is being used. So hopefully that gives you kind of an idea about what to do with link text. Again, be mindful about the link text you're using. Yes?
Will a speech recognition system, will it read the Aria label text? If you said click PDF one that is described by blah, 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 would it read that, or is it going to just read the actual link text that's between the tags?
That's a great question, and as most things, it depends. It depends on the screen reader and how it's configured, because you can actually configure the screen reader to your liking, and screen readers have become much more configurable over time. So it depends on how it's set up, but in most cases, you can't really be sure. So what we recommend is that you at least make sure that the link text is descriptive enough so that what you're mentioning here is necessary. It can be nice to have, but it shouldn't be the only way to actually, you know, perceive what the link text is about.
So to kind of use that as a segue, right, using proper link authoring, right? Don't use a big long URL. Have where that URL is actually going to take somebody. Now some organizations are like, well, I need the URL on the page because if somebody's looking at a printout of the document, they need to be able to see the URL to be able to type it in manually and all that, right? So from a document authoring perspective, use good text to hyperlink, and then if you need to provide the URL, I would actually provide the URL but not hyperlink it, because somebody who's using an electronic version of the document is going to be able to follow the link from the good hyperlinked text, right? I would even take that one step further in the PDF and artifact, again, put it in an artifact container, the URL, because somebody using a screen reader doesn't need to listen to the URL because they're going to be able to follow the link with the functionality that's been provided by the hyperlinking of the good text, right? And, you know, but sometimes people want to give the URL, maybe you can't change the document or whatever, providing in a PDF, providing alternative text for link tags is kind of a workaround for that. So somebody using assistive technology, instead of having to listen to the big long URL, they can hear where that link is actually going to take them, right? Also providing contents and link annotation. It's required by the standards, but interestingly enough, it's not really supported by assistive technology. So yeah, it's a good thing to do. I highly recommend you do it, but certainly providing alternative text on the link tags, you want to do that. And we're going to touch on this with forms briefly too, trying to pay attention to the time we have left. The tab order, when you have PDFs with links or forms in it, the tab order has to be set to follow the document structure, which is kind of a technical way of saying that when you're hitting the tab key to navigate through a document, that should follow the order of the tags, right, from the tag tree. That's what that means. Right.
Right. Forms is another great thing, right? We have an animation here to kind of show you what we're talking about. Forms can be really accessible and they can be really inaccessible. This one is a good example of one that is not really very accessible. If you look at it first, we have the color contrast issue. That's not easy to read for anybody, right? So that's one thing right there. But also notice when a field gets focused, the description of what should be in the field just disappears. So if you're unlucky, the screen reader will jump to the next field, and then it is just about to read to you what was supposed to go in that field, but now it's gone, and then it has nothing to read. Okay, all right, so how are you going to do that? There are some things that you should remember when designing forms. One is that if fields are required, don't make them red, or any other color for that matter. Don't make them bold. Maybe use an asterisk. Don't use a color. Well, you can use a color, but again, it shouldn't be the only thing. Use the asterisk to indicate that it's a required field, for example. Thank you. Thanks so much. Make sure that labels are used for every field. A label is what you can see right here. We have a form, we have a label, and then we have an input. The input is the field. That's kind of where you put your text in. But the label has a for attribute that says this label is for that. And then we can read what is the label's name. It is first name. So now a screen reader will open that up and it'll say, oh my gosh, there's a field. What's that field about? Oh, I can find it right here. It's about first name. That's what should go into that field. Again, this is very easy to do once you know how to do it and once you know why it's important. But again, that's not a given, right? Another thing is we can use Aria labels or Aria labels, but again, usually when they are used, that's to spice up what you already have. If this is not done properly, then your Aria labels, that definitely should not be your first protocol. Do this, and then for most people, it's going to be fine, and then you can put your Aria labels on there to kind of sprinkle a little extra on it, but it's not a replacement for this at all. If there are any error messages, make sure that they are easily recognizable as error messages. If the email address is not correct, if the email address doesn't follow a specific format, don't put it at the bottom of the page and not tell the screen reader about where it is. If you make it red, that's fine. But if that means that if you can't perceive that color, or if you're using a screen reader, that you don't know that it actually popped up and it's just being put in the form somewhere, then you might not actually notice that there is an error message, and all you get is you're trying to submit the form again and again and nothing happens to you because you can't really see that red box that you put on the side, right? Yep.
So in PDF, just really quickly, again, the last point here is the tab order, right, which we touched on with links as well. So just making sure that that navigation functionality is there. When you're designing forms, and converting to PDF, you want to keep in mind, you want your forms to be fill then print, right? If you're making a form so that somebody has to print it out and then fill it out, that's not accessible to a whole bunch of people. Right, so something to think about. And as mentioned with with labels and so on in HTML forms, in PDF you need to have tooltips, right? So that's how a screen reader tells somebody what the question is it reads the tooltip. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. This we don't have nearly enough time to get into the level of technicality that this is, but radio buttons get messy, and they're inherently inaccessible in PDF, but there is a solution. Come to our booth if you want to know more, because it's like we've got 5 minutes left. But keyboard functionality is a really important thing to keep in mind, which I'm going to use to segue to the next slide. Keyboard functionality overall, not just with forms or with links or whatever, but being able to navigate through the web page. A lot of people aren't using mice to navigate, to click on things, to make choices, and so on and so forth. Again, we go to a lot of conferences and so on. I went to an accessibility conference a few years ago now and saw one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen. But in walking around the vendor area and seeing all the booths and stuff, there was a guy in a wheelchair who was navigating his way through visiting all of the vendors and stuff with his feet and an iPad, right? And that's how he was navigating through the vendor area and so on. So, I mean, not using a mouse, right? There's puff and sip, and there's all kinds of things, joysticks and switches, right? So a lot of people are using other technologies besides mouse. So you've got to make sure that that functionality is available. For all of your users who are visiting your websites or using your documents.
Yeah, and if you want to fix it, and hopefully you will want to, the first thing to do is to learn how to use the tab button on your keyboard. Because when you open up a web page, one of the first things I usually do if I want to determine if somebody put an effort into making a web page accessible, I press the tab button. Because if a jump to main content button shows up on the web page, then I know that somebody made an effort, right? And if I keep clicking on my tab button, and I can see that the focus indicator, that square that goes around the links, it goes through the page in a predictable manner. It doesn't jump around, like that, but it kind of follows a path where I can see, okay, when I press the next time, I know where I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the next element on the page. Then that's very reassuring, because then I know, okay, somebody did something here. That's what you should do first. And if the tab order isn't correct, meaning that what I just described isn't happening, then that should be the first thing you do. Because when tab order is good, then it is possible to use the web page using a keyboard. Doesn't mean it's great, doesn't mean it's enjoyable, but it's possible. The only thing that can stop anybody using the web page with a keyboard is what we call a trap. Let's say that there is an element on the page that when you tap to it, then that element will kind of take over that tab button and do something inside the element instead. It could be, for example, a text area. We all know the forms with the text area where you can put multiple lines of text. If nothing is done, once the cursor goes into the text area and you then press the tab button again, you get a tab inside the text area. And you can't get out. In many cases, you can't actually get out again, and you're trapped, you're stuck. And you can't get to the content that is further down the page. So try and go through your pages that way, and if something traps you, or if the order is predictable, then fix that. Because that will have gotten you a very long way when it comes to helping everybody visit the web page and consuming the information on it.
Just really quickly, when it comes to PDF, I already mentioned tab order and stuff like that. But generally speaking, if you're structuring your PDFs well with the headings and proper tagging for your lists and tables, which I'm going to touch on briefly in a second, the functionality is there. Right, so that's nice. You can build in traps into a web page and stuff like that. A lot harder to build traps into a PDF. You really have to really want to, right? So just don't want to. Okay. But again, if your headings and stuff are there, then your navigation, your keyboard functionality is going to be provided for you. So that's nice. But just really quickly, again, stop by the booth if you want to know more about data tables in PDF, but they can get really messy and really nasty, and a lot of times people are just like, oh, we don't use them, or we don't know what to do. But making sure, first of all, that you're not using tables for layout, right? From an authoring perspective, don't use a table in a Word document to make your stuff line up on the page, because a screen reader is going to tell somebody that there's a table there when there's not really a table there, right? That's the problem. And then making sure that your header cells are tagged as headers with the proper scope so that the associations can be made from the data cells to their headers that they're supposed to be related to and stuff like that. Complex tables can get nasty. Come stop by our table if you want to learn more about PDF accessibility with complex tables, all right? Because we've got about 1 minute left. There's been questions along the way, so thanks for that. Please remember to fill out a session evaluation, right? You can scan the QR code and submit it online. But here's us, our contact information. Thanks for coming. Again, stop by the booth. That's not just a shameless sales plug.
We want to answer your questions.
Thank you.
Please come and ask them. That time went fast.